Nsem-Pii TV nie.
Ensam no egusu a bobo ana ebobo edeba na ene the Jubilee House I know here the seat of the presidency and bridge ye above honomo eho ewosu yi John Dramani Mahama and in the NDC can Nsem bebre to ayampia bebre kaya pesese bi kyerese ana kwa kufuwa duni Dr. Hajj Mahmoud Bawumia mamu no nyama bebre wo ho a omoye ya na ababia sabi enhyede ni ti omo ba ye Ghana fo nyina ehwe kwan a ombefa so ebuma yi ne niema obeya ebeda nsonko as compared to the previous administration na asemba ko a ebeto dwa nka as usual Ghana ha asemba so ne eboso 1 2 na say de to so miensa na ekwa kugu ensa nwumri former Auditor General NDC Aparachiki John Dramani Mahama appointee 2016 ye 2 no naka nakakra bi yamanako o appointee ura Daniel Yawo Domelovo say ono na emeye Auditor General papa ye beka ya ye ho nsamba bibiri abra ka chen say won proceed on leave yesesa no ebe nsem bibiri na Mr. Domelovo yenim say oka the oral committee operation recover all loot I need Nsem betu to just okuyi to ablakwa person yini hu frame and a host of other issues and also ababonten ababe express a dissatisfaction with John Dramani Mahama and NDC aban no they may be o mashase o moye o say o wan soma yen say oral committee yen konkoji $58 million bi en free national cathedral project ya entimi ankoso eye den en wow say nipa kuro ye also will invest a multi-million dollar into facility B ewo Kotoka International Airport or say offering the Hajj Village project. Now Mr. Daniel Yawo Domelovo wa kasa yipa na odibi manage John Dramani Mahama no osadi museum manage the spokesperson aye Ura Felix of Osukwachi. And him say for the past weeks you Osukwachi wa kasa bebre and who said 2 days ago, some Indian visual about Monty and also Kasabi with regards to excavators, once and some Nina to try to cover up near maybe a ecoso. Now, this is the statement time Daniel Yawo Domelovo, the former Auditor General, or say John Dramani Mahama and his spokesperson, or Monty, or say, like, seriously, Hajj Village project does not involve a single person of taxpayers' money. We are a response to Felix of Osukwachi some of Bekai and the disclaimer be issue yes Ghana for say Moma Kasa National Cathedral ho amobaya mo so mu disclaimer kwa see Hajj Village project mo see cathedral it is not of priority to the taxpayer a den Hajj project there a choir of priority to the taxpayer and Daniel Domelovo say Honorable Felix of Osukwachi spokesperson for John Dramani Mahama please tell it to the Marines and say we untimi me kan kire Ghana for until me country well meaning Ghanaians. E ya say nim your left and right na. E ya say nim on mind say the sibu na na. Na nu ye mobile musa the bukata na say ba na. O say the Ghana Airports Company Limited is a state-owned enterprise, which means it has no shareholders or the government of Ghana owns majority of the shares. The Felix of Osukwachi disclaimer na rebut or the be say Ghana Airports Company Limited no and yes taxpayers money on the yes Hajj Village project no kure bi ani Ghana Airports Company Limited they operate based on taxpayers money Ghana taxpayers money sika budget Ghana Revenue Authority Internal Revenue Service budget and no be near the more di your mujuma. So the Ghana Airport Company Limited is owned and controlled by the government of Ghana. It is truly astonishing, especially as we grapple with recovering over $58 million squandered on the National Cathedral project, that one of the key priorities of the Mahama administration is the fruitless and wasteful Hajj Village project. The Daniel Yawo Domelovo say Hajj Village project sebi nyan sebi enim faso bi eni so emfa mpuntu bi emre Ghana fo na se mo sore kaseti ai se National Cathedral emfa so bi eni so a Says he can yebetimi de see hospitals, yebetimi de see schools, yebetimi de aya kwanya. Dean nti na modwene say John Dramani Mahama wo de ubetimi asesa millions of dollars e de akwa akoye Hajj village project. Daniel Domelovo, member of the oral committee, say omunnim no moye sade na, then the oral committee is also going to come after them because it is neither here nor there. A wasteful, a Ghana sika, and ye babe say no, Ghana sika, and ye kwako tuagu. Because what na see ye now jene ho said ye video be ba chire mu Ghanaians omo abuchi the diaspora ebusa say Hajj a once in a year thing. 1 month pay. I stand here in 2 months. Why should the government of Ghana invest millions of dollars of taxpayers' money into that project when it is not going to yield any proper benefits via to money? Reactions and comments, no, just say Nsem-Pii no ayebebre. Na fellows of Osukwache we dey oyesen ko ba be cover up. Nenso anya yie kura. Na after say Daniel Domelovo di na asemi tudwe any Ghanaians the diaspora. Dr. Gideon Bwanko also na oye presidential aide spokesperson for the vice president. They say Tano North, I think so. Mashebe Jani also at the fellows of Osukwache up to the proper position here in the floor of parliament. I find one channel. Yentie na yenhwe said Nsem na nkasa egusu a esi echo.
Honorable Felix Kwachiofosu, fact. The Hajj village is primarily an airport terminal building for check-in and pilgrim facilitation, owned and being built by the Ghana Airport Company. Not a person of taxpayers' money is involved. Honorable, Ghana Airport Company, is it a private entity or is state-owned? If it is private entity, the executive president will not be the one to appoint its director. Secondly, every ticket purchase, Ghana Airport takes tax. That tax doesn't go to airport company because it's a private-owned company or a state-owned company. So the fact that you are saying a taxpayer's money is not involved, I beg to differ. If I'm wrong, correct me. Secondly, which company builds a terminal at an international airport which will be used once in a year? Because Hajj pilgrimage it happens once in a year. So how can you build this which will be used once in a year? So my question is, after the Hajj, which doesn't even last up to 2 months, what happens to this terminal? You see, Hajj is important, but Hajj is not a priority. This is a priority. Look at the citizens of Ghana. Look at what they are going through. This is a priority. This is what taxpayers' money should be spent on. Even if government has to go for a loan to do this, government has to do this. You see, I remember when you lost your parliamentary seat, how your face looked like on TV when you go to the radio and TV stations. Today you are back in office again. So look at your cheeks now. Mister, what is wrong is wrong. Don't defend it. Tell me, which airport will build a terminal and use it once in a year? If there is sense in it, tell me. Let's choose priority. This is the priority and not the Hajj village. Cheers.
Honorable members, we now listen to Honorable Gideon Bwanko.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to the address that was presented to this House by the President. And Mr. Speaker, my good friend and classmate, the Honorable Felix Osukwache, made reference to what Professor Naafoli Sekefio said. And I also want to reference Professor Naafoli Sekefio. She said in one of her books that don't tempt me because I don't have the power to resist temptation. The honorable member has gone on a path of putting out some information and data in his attempt to rationalize what we describe as lamentations by the president, and in so doing, some misleading data have been put out. Mr. Speaker, it is important to establish that no government can run the full hog of his or her term without having to deal with some arrears in payments, some unfulfilled promises, and even in some cases, things that were not promised are delivered. But at the end of the day, analysts and scholars have given us indicators that measure whether or not the overall performance was good, moderate, or it was bad. And that analysis is akin to what a physician will do on a patient. You may walk to the hospital as very healthy, but the doctor through laboratory test is able to tell you, because of the level of your temperature, you have headache. And this is what the economists have done for us. And Mr. Speaker, I put this into context to indicate whether or not the economy that has been handed over to President Mahama and the NDC is an economy that is poorly managed or it is not. And the acid test to all of this in political decisions is what is the alternative. President Mahama is 2 months into his government, so we can only measure him in relative terms by comparing what he has inherited with what he left when he once had the opportunity to serve. Mr. Speaker, and I want to carry everybody along. Let's look at some of these indicators and make our own fair judgment, because this is a house of records. President Mahama and the NDC left office in 2016 with a real GDP growth of 3.4%. This is when the IMF had given a target of 5.4%, and even the previous year, 2015, was 4%. And yet, President Mahama ended up with a declined growth of 3.4%. Today, the economy that he says is not in good shape has growth for third quarter of 2024 of 6.4% and is going to exceed the IMF target of 4% by the end of the year.
Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Felix talked about fiscal deficit and said it measures the prudence in government expenditure, and I agree with him. They left office in 2016 with a non-rebased fiscal deficit of 9.3% and a rebased fiscal deficit of 6.5%. Today, the fiscal deficit is around 4.2%, leaving a deficit of 6.45%, and the one who left a deficit of 4.2%, who has managed the economy better. But you see, that aside, the primary balance determines the fiscal health of any economy. And Mr. Speaker, it is interesting to note that President Mahama left the economy in the health of the negatives, a primary deficit of 1.4%. Today, our deficit is, our fiscal balance, primary balance is in the surplus. So if you're talking about data, you have to support what you say with data. And interestingly, Mr. Speaker, Ghana has had an all-time high of primary balance of 1.59% in 2021. But shockingly, our all-time low in terms of our primary balance was recorded in 2014 under President Mahama.
Wow.
All-time low, since independence. Primary balance, all-time low. Mr. Speaker, he talked about debt to GDP ratio. The debt to GDP ratio, non-rebased, when they left office, was 73%. The 55.6% they talk about is after the 2018 rebasing. Today, the non-rebased debt to GDP ratio is 72%. Yeah. It's lower than what you left in terms of non-rebates. Wait for next year when the Statistical Service rebases our GDP to see whether the debt to GDP ratio will not be below what you left. That is the most important thing. Mr. Speaker, again, our current account balance, which records your international transactions, including exports and imports, was in the deficit during President Mahama's time when he left office in 2016. Today, it is in the surplus. Mr. Speaker, our gross international reserves was 6.2 billion. Today, it is 8.9 billion. It covered 3.5 months of imports cover. Today, it is covering 4 months of imports cover. Which of these two is the best? And you talk about exchange rate depreciation. Yes, our cedi naturally had a characteristic feature of undergoing depreciation because of the regime that we practice. But they left an exchange rate depreciation from 2009 to 2016 of 72%. What President Akufo-Addo left is 71%. Which one is the best? Which one is the best? So that is important to note. Mr. Speaker, this is an indication. This is an indication that the economy is doing well. But Mr. Speaker, a relatively strong economy is what? It is the one that is able to provide infrastructure, that is able to provide jobs, healthcare, pay salaries, provide stable electricity, and all of that. Mr. Speaker, the government that President Mahama is inheriting has laid solid foundations. And Mr. Speaker, it is based on this solid foundation that the government has been able to reduce the number of young people who are not employed by 2.13 million. President Mahama has a responsibility to reduce that further. Today, we have seen the growth in the agriculture sector and our exports are increasing. That is why we are having a trade surplus. For the first time, we are recording trade surplus.
Nsem-Pii na Nsem so now show on my YouTube channel.
Be the first to know Nsem-Pii TV.